All right, so chapter 2, it's about data. So, what are data? Remember what we said yesterday it was? If not, it's fine. I said it
Not
once.
Really.
Okay.
That is a plural though.
It is plural. Numbers with context. So we have two major ways that we can treat data. And we'll do a lot with these two different types in this unit, and then we'll kind of pause from it for a while, and then we're going to come back to stuff where it starts coming back when we deal with the two types but completely individually. So the first one is it's categorical. So a categorical, if I can spell, that would be great, is used to answer questions about how cases fall into categories. So a categorical variable may be comprised of word labels or it may use numbers as labels. So when we're thinking about some examples of that, we would be thinking about zip codes. Okay, because that's a label for an area. It's still a number, but it's used to more or less give information about where you live. It's your, how do I explain it? It's a label for where you live. So it's just, yeah, anyways, but it's still a number. Another example like that would be a jersey number. So whatever number you are, that's describing you. It's not giving information about data. It's just about that particular thing. But some other categorical variables that aren't numbers would be male or female, your religious affiliation, type of residence, so those are just a few examples. Obviously there'd be other things as well, but those are the main ones. So then the other type is a quantitative variable is used to answer questions about the quantity of what is being measured. And so those are going to be comprised of numerical values. So some examples of this, numbers used as quantities would be your age, because it's like the number of years, the number of siblings, income, just money in general, degrees as in like temperature. Last year I said it and somebody thought I meant like how many college degrees you had. And then measurements. So those things all have like units to them. And so it's really important that we always write the units with them when we are working with those. Some key features are center and spread variability, which that's going to come up a little bit later in this unit when we talk about more of like getting into the actual like statistic like analysis and stuff like that. And then I should say that this one is for, well, that one's for quantitative. Then let me do this, the key features for categorical. It is the percent or percentage or proportion of observations in each of the categories. And so categorical is useful, but we don't use it quite as much, especially early on as we do the quantitative stuff. And so we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about quantitative as opposed to, spending as much time with categorical. So, find a new color. A quantitative variable is discrete. Okay, and that doesn't mean secret, like, or really quiet. If it is possible, if it's not, if it is, hello, why can I not talk? If it's possible values form a set of separate numbers such as 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Something to note about that, discrete variables have a finite, so that means we can count them, number of possible values Also, if I'm ever scrolling up too fast or something like that, just let me know. I try not to go up super fast, but I get told I write fast a lot, so. So an example or examples of this, you can think about like the number of pets in a household. We could think about the number of children in a family. Or the number of languages spoken by an individual. So when it's discrete, we have a finite number of possible values, but another option is for it to be continuous. So a quantitative variable is continuous. If its possible values form an interval so continuous variables have an infinite number of possible values. So some examples of this one would be like height and weight. Because there's so many different options of how tall and like what your weight could be. I mean, even like down to like the ounces can be different and stuff like that. So that would be something that they would consider an infinite number of possible values. Age. So, I mean, obviously we're thinking about people. I mean, you don't typically see somebody that's, you know, older than like, what, 110, I think, maybe like one of the oldest people alive right now. I don't know, kind of making that up, but I know there's some people over 100 out there right now. So, it's like that. Obviously, there's a lot of different options. And I mean, if you're talking about like, you know, age of a tree or something like that, we were one of the like Ripley's Believe It or Not things or whatever, and they were talking about like the sequoias, and they were talking about it's been around since like, I want to say they said like 200 years, like BC. So like they've been around for like a really long time because they've been able to like date them out like that. So obviously there's like a lot of possibilities when you're looking at age. Is where I was going with that. You have so many different options for like number of years and stuff like that. And then another one would be like blood pressure. Because there's different values that get associated with that. And so that's why they're considering those as continuous. All right, so the next thing, what is a statistic? And So we would describe that as a numerical summary of data. So these ones probably be things that you're hopefully you're relatively familiar with, or at least that you have used them at some point in your math career. So examples of that would be mean, median, standard deviation. You may have seen that one a little bit. That one's basically just how far from the mean you are. Range, etc. So there's obviously going to be some other ones, but those are the big ones that we'll use in here. What time does this class get out? This one only gets out at 1:25. Plenty of time. All right, so now we're going to get into really what this section, those are a lot of definitions and explanations. Being able to classify variables as categorical or quantitative is going to be a big part of this section. But the other major thing that we have in here is the context of data, and so that's what we're going to be looking at, the W's and H. They always call it the W's, but I always want to add the H because it's how does not start with W, so I don't want to classify it as that. So, and it kind of helps you remember it. So, in order to determine the context of data, consider the W's and H. So those are going to be your who, what, where, why, when. I don't know why when is at the bottom. Who, what, when, where, why, how. And so we're going to talk about what each of those look like in the scenario of statistics. So who, that is, who are the individuals or cases basically that are being studied. What, and something that I would just put in parentheses is in what units, okay, because we really care about units, specifically in this question part of it. And so we want to know what variables were recorded about each of the individual or each of the individuals or cases. And so in that particular section, when you're doing these, okay, I will usually, when it comes to a quiz or a test, I'll list out either a bullet point for each of them, or I'll say I may actually go ahead and write out what the W's and the H are for you. So under the what category, you'll write out what all the variables are, and then there's going to be a separate question at the bottom that will say to label them as either categorical or quantitative. And so you would have to put units with them as well when you get to that. So the next one, who, what, when, I'm going to put them back in order so that it's easier to remember. So when was the data collected? then where. We want to know where was the data collected. Why was the data collected? And just something to note is that this particular category helps to know how to treat the variable. Okay, so if we're treating it as quantitative or categorical. And then the last one is how. So how the data are collected can make the difference between insight and nonsense. And so just something to note, at first it's going to be kind of hard to pick apart like what things are important. You know, there might be multiple things that look like they could be a who, if you will. And so it's kind of just a process of just like getting used to it. Like as you go through the problems, like I would recommend you do the problem and then you check it to see if you like almost right away to see if you did it right. So as you're getting used to it, we're going to do several examples, but still once you start really doing them on your own, it's a lot of like looking at them and being like, okay, I have to sit here and try to pick through like what's important. If you want to like have a highlighter to like highlight stuff that you think like that would help you define like the important information that you're looking for, that's fine too. But another thing to note is that sometimes a problem won't give you all the information that you need to answer these. And so you can put something like doesn't say, not given, not specific. Usually the book will call it not specific. And so that's an option if you get to that point of like, it doesn't say where it was collected. Okay, you can say doesn't say, not specific. Sometimes it will say, and even the book will say that it's not specific. And so there's a little bit that's kind of left up to like the individual of like how you interpret it. And so I do try to take that into account, but I also try not to give, on quizzes and tests, I try not to give ones that are like really unclear or where there's like a lot of discretion about like, oh, this could be this, but it might be this instead. So yeah. So then just a quick question. Are the numbers 17, 21, 44, 76 data? Nope, because there's no context. Now, if you're told that those are jersey numbers, then would it be data? Yeah. Okay, yes, because then it's telling you, it's giving you a context to what those numbers are for. So I think it's the last actual note, and then we'll look at a couple examples of things. We got through this a lot faster than I thought. Data must have context to be meaningful. Okay, so that's kind of just reiterating what we already said. Without context, data cannot be interpreted. So obviously, like when you see these problems, you'll kind of get what I mean, but it's going to give you a lot of information about the specific problem, giving it context, because if they just gave you a list of numbers like I did in that little question that I asked, you can't answer the who, what, when, where, why, how. It has to give you more information to be able to answer that. And it's okay if they don't give you all of it, but they have to give you at least a little bit of context for it to make sense. All right, so since we got farther than I thought, we are going to look at the textbook. Sometimes I'll just use textbook examples. Sometimes I will just have like a worksheet printed out for you. This is one where I kind of do a little bit of both. I can even get this out of here. And if I recall, I think this book is one where sometimes they don't give you all the odd answers in the back, and they actually give you some even ones. So it can be kind of random, but my book is a little bit different because it's like all the answers are in the back, or for the most part, so I don't always know exactly what yours has in it. But all right, it's on page 16. Also, there may be a couple pages that might be a little bit off from my book because there were like 2 versions of the same edition textbook, and we got a couple of each version. So most of the stuff should be the same in the actual textbook, but the back, the like appendix pages, some of them are going to be different. So just so you know. I've tried to like make a note in my notes when we have that situation so I can be like, okay, it should be in this page for y'all, but some things that either I haven't written it down or I have it wrong still or something like that. So let's see. Let's go ahead and look at, I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit here with the examples. But let's go ahead and look at number 14. Just so we can actually get one of the W's problems done. So the other thing to note about this book is that they pretty much just write the instructions in italics before the start of that particular section. So the instructions are written right above question 13, and it'll say like for exercises like this one, 13 through 26, and then it tells you what to do. So we're going to identify the W's and H name the variables, and then list if they're categorical or quantitative, and make sure we put units on quantitative stuff. So when you're doing homework and stuff, I don't require you to like write these questions down because they're really long and like they're there. But if you want to do it so when you're going back to study for quizzes and tests, like that you wouldn't have to like open to your book, that's completely fine. But last year they were like, can we like not write the question? I was like, yeah, it's fine. So I know what the question is, or I can look up the question if there's an issue. All right, so number 14. The state education department requires local school districts to keep these records on all students. Age, race or ethnicity, days absent, current grade level, standardized test scores in reading and mathematics, and any disabilities or special education needs. So, let's see. All right, so the who. Any idea who the who is in this one? Who the who? It is not.
Students?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Some of them have two things that look like it can be. It was funny because the first year I taught this, like I took statistics, but I took like the like dual enrollment statistics, and so it was very different. Like we didn't do this. So when I was like going through it the first year, I was like, why is it not the education department, you know? And so it's a big adjustment. So all right, so it's the students is who we're talking about, and then we want to know the what. So what are the variables?
Huge list. Age, race, or ethnicity, days absent, current grade level, and then all of them.
Yep. So it's kind of crazy, but you do have to write them all. And sometimes when they list them out, sometimes there's like some words you can kind of leave out and it still keep its meaning. So like that's fine if this is one of the longer ones that has more to it. Like for example, where it has like the any disabilities or special education needs, if you just wrote like disabilities, that would be fine. All right, so then when
Am I wrong?
this is where you have to read into the problem a little bit. So it has to be kept current. Okay, because they want current grade level. So that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you really have to read into the problem. Again, this is one of those where my initial reaction as well was not specific. And then the book was like, nope, you're wrong. And I was like, okay. All right, how about where?
School? Or is that just not?
This one's not specific. So it's one of those where if the problem said, you know, like at Denby Baptist Christian School, then, you know, or if it says, you know, the office staff at Denby Baptist Christian School keeps the whatever, then you would have a where. But this one they don't specifically say, because it's just like for that state, it's like there are like regulations and stuff. Let's see how. Or well, here, let's do why first and then let's do how. Just so we keep it consistent. Okay, because it's required. So that they always have it. All right, and then lastly for that is the how.
Just like keep a record.
Yeah, so it's just info that's collected and stored in school records. All right, and so that would be how you list out your W's and H, and then it wants you And sometimes it won't ask you for this, and then sometimes it may just ask you to explain what the variables are, but we're going to do the categorical and quantitative. All right, so what are the categorical variables? So those, again, are the variables that are, they're using numbers as labels or word labels. So what would those things be out of this list?
Test scores.
So the test scores are going to be more of a specific number.
Disabilities,
Disabilities is one.
race or ethnicity. I kind of went out of those.
That's fine. And there's one more.
Grade level.
Yep, grade level. So then your quantitative ones. So those would be age, test scores, and the number of absences. I don't think I spelled it right. Is that spelled right? What is happening? That doesn't look right.
I think you spelled it right.
Is it? I can't decide if the C is supposed to be an S or not.
It's definitely supposed to be a C. Oh, wait.
I don't know. I have it written both ways, one on my paper and one on the iPad, and I can't tell which one it's supposed to be. Yeah, Ethan, something you're going to learn about means I'm really bad at spelling.
I honestly don't know.
I frequently
Is
spell
this
things wrong, so
correct?
if you know something is spelled wrong, I won't be offended if you tell me.
Can we get cookie points?
I don't do cookie points for spelling errors. So that's the other thing. If you correct a mistake that I make, like in doing like math or something like that, then you earn cookie points, and after you earn 10 cookie points, I bring in a pack of cookies for the class. So, and that's effective in all my classes.
You didn't get cookie points last year, freak out. Because you were all stupid.
College algebra, you probably will get a decent amount because it's my first year doing it, so I won't have like worked everything out ahead of time, and like I'll work a decent amount of them, but not all of them.
Freak out yesterday, we like just talked the entire period. Like we barely do.
It's funny because last year in Algebra 1, I made like a decent amount of mistakes, but they would like never catch them.
Yeah.
So then I'd be like, oh, I messed that up, and they were like, oh, I thought that, but I didn't want to say anything, and I'm like, well, you could have had a cookie point. Trying to see, what do we have? All right, let's look at number 2 and number 4 real quick, and then we'll probably be done because the other ones are going to be longer. All right, so number 2. A January 2007 Gallup poll question asked, in general, do you think things have gotten better or gotten worse in this country in the last 5 years? Possible answers were better, worse, no change, don't know, and no response. What kind of variable is this response? Yep, categorical. And then number 4, a medical researcher measures the increase in heart rate of patients under a stress test. What kind of variable is the researcher studying? And just going back, because we were talking about units, with age and stuff like that, like on the last problem, sometimes you'll see the book will write like in years, but if it's not specified, like I don't usually write it. Test scores, we don't know like what those units would have been, like if it was like points or percentage or whatever, so we're not going to put anything there. And then number of absences, we don't know. I mean, we could assume days, but it's not given. But if it had given that stuff, like sometimes it'll say like the amount of money in dollars or something like that, then we would want to put like in dollars or whatever as the units on those. And then like with this one, talking about the heart rate, if it said in beats per minute, we would want to specify that. But because it doesn't say, you don't have to put it on those ones. So, I mean, if it's a common sense thing, like age, you could just assume in years. But again, they're not talking about like infants, but if they're talking about little kids, they might actually be talking in months instead. So, number 10 looks like a fast one, so we can probably go ahead and do that one and get that one out of the way. That way tomorrow we'll be able to go through some on the worksheet, and then y'all have time to actually work on them in class. Since we got through way more today than I thought we were. That's good. All right, so these ones, the instructions that are on the page before it say, for each description of data, identify who and what were investigated in the population of interest. So number 10, some motion pictures are profitable and others are not. Understandably, the movie industry would like to know what makes a movie successful. Data from 120 first-run movies released in 2005 suggests that longer movies actually make less profit. So the who for this would be... Okay, yeah, the movie industry. Okay, if you wanted to be very specific, you could say 120 first-run movies, because that's exactly what they looked at. Because, I mean, we don't want to survey, every single movie that's out there. They're just going to want to, pick a group of them. And then it also wants us to do the what. So, what would that be? Or what are the variables that we're looking at here, basically, is what that's asking. Okay, so, the success. Yeah, so the success and then the profit. And I think, did it group that with length as well? Profit and length.
Yeah, that longer movies make less profit.
Okay, so yeah, we could say... So movie success, and then we could say profit and length kind of together. And then, what was the last thing? It said the population of interest. So what were they, what specifically did they look at and when, kind of? It's kind of the way.
Their profit in 2005.
Okay, so the first run movies in 2005.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of a weird question because normally if you were doing all the pieces, you would kind of answer those things anyways. I don't know why they necessarily write the question like that, but 120 first run movies in 2005. All right, so we'll do at least one more, probably one more like that tomorrow, and then we'll actually get into a couple more of the, all the W's and stuff like that. So that's where you really need more of a more examples of that, because like I said, it's one of those things that just comes with time of just doing several of them to start to really pick up what it's asking for.